Live from the bridge at the Launchpad Studios in Huntington, New York, it's Sports Talk New York with your hosts, Mark Rosenman and AJ Carter. Sports Talk New York is sponsored in part by Cardboard Memories, Clearview, Long Island, the law firm of Decolator, Cohen, and DePrisco, the Phoenix Tube Company, PIMS Incorporated, fueling brand performance for 30 years, Prince Associates for all your insurance needs, and Soho Table Hockey. Here are your hosts, Mark and AJ.
And good Sunday evening to you. Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening. So much to get to in the world of sports. Jim Leyritz is going to join us in a little while. We're going to talk lots of stuff about Buck Showalter, Jets and Giants, the usual. But the Jets actually look pretty good. We'll talk more about that.
They look good for 30 minutes.
They look better. Listen,
that second half.
We'll talk when we get to football.
I was screaming at the TV in the second half.
Oh, you scream at everything. So
that's true. But I was screaming more than usual.
All right. Well, if you are new to our show, we want to let you know there are many ways you can get a hold of us. You can download the iPhone and Android app and the Alexa app and listen to us over your smart speaker at home or in the car using the 365 Sportscast app. And if you are new to the show, we start off each and every week with the Major League Baseball report with John Coppinger. It's sponsored by Cardboard Memories, which is one of Long Island's most reputable memorabilia retail stores for over 29 years. The owner of Cardboard Memories, Scott Stamell, is known for his knowledge and savvy of authentic autographs, and he's been featured on HBO Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Cardboard Memories possesses the honesty and integrity one would want and need from a memorabilia source. Cardboard Memories is always buying collections large and small. Let Cardboard Memories run your next charity fundraising auction. Call them to find out how they can help your organization at no cost. Cardboard Memories located at 6401 Jericho Turnpike, Comac, New York. Visit them on the web, cardboardmemories.com, or follow them on Facebook or Instagram. All right, John, we're going to continue. Obviously at the very end, we're going to ask your feelings, and I'm sure you're in lockstep with all of us.
Just to be fair to John, as we're holding back on a lot of that talk, so we do have Jim Leyritz as our guest to talk about that.
Right. So last week we went over some of the remaining free agent pitchers and the landscape for that. Certainly a lot more good names on that list than there are in the catchers list. Interestingly enough, there are a few names that kind of, you look at, you got Austin Romine, you got Christian Betancourt, you got Kurt Suzuki, you got Robinson Chernos, you got Jose Lobaton, Wilson Ramos. The one guy that I like, he's not that old. He was a second-round draft pick and really had a great minor league career, but it never transferred over. It's Chance Sisco. So out of that list, John, obviously the Yankees can use some catching help. The Mets are obviously set at that position. They're not going to look at. But out of this list, if you're a GM, which is the guy that you take a flyer on that might give you some offense?
If you talk about offense, Chance Sisco might be is an interesting case. I like Stephen Vogt. I don't know if he's retired or if he signed somewhere, but he came up on a free agent list.
That's on the same list.
Yeah, I would look at Stephen Vogt. I would also look at a guy who made some notorious news recently, Williams Astudillo, who is La Tortuga with Minnesota, and he just got into a bench clearing brawl down in the Winter League. So.
Isn't he defensively challenged? They had trouble finding a position for him in Minnesota.
Yeah, they did, but he's also versatile, so you could bring him in to catch a little bit, and then he can play. He's right. It's kind of the Wilmer Flores problem. He's versatile, but he can't really play any position. But he could certainly. I think Astudillo can give you a little bit of offense. The choices out there aren't great, but if you're looking for a backup, there are some names that are interesting. Stephen Vogt, Astudillo, Sisco. Unfortunately, I'm sure they'd love to bring Austin Romine back, but he announced his retirement on Facebook recently, so I don't think that's an option.
So if you're the New York Yankees, the Mets, we said, are set a catcher this year, and looking forward because they have a prospect. He's about the number 5 prospect in Major League Baseball, and it's coming up probably another year or so. But if you're the Yankees, you're committed to Gary Sanchez almost because you have to be. What do? Do you just hang back, see what you've got, and how long do you wait for the trademark and see what you can get? Or are they going to stick with Sanchez?
I think that they're going to stick with Sanchez. I do think they're going to hang back. I think they're going to leave their options open. Certainly, with everything on hold, it makes it a little bit tougher. But they seem to have committed themselves to Sanchez. They tendered him a deal, so I think you kind of have to stick with him and at least see, because if he doesn't, it's not like he has any trade value right now. So it can only go up from here. So if Sanchez has a great first 3 months of the season and you want to capitalize on that and make a trade for, say, a lesser catcher and some prospects, they could certainly do that. They have nothing to lose at this point.
All right. Last week I called it. I said by next week we'll be talking about Buck Showalter as our manager. We're going to have Jim Leyritz up next. But before we let you go, your feeling on Buck Showalter as opposed to the landscape of other managers that were out there. Did the Mets get this one right?
Absolutely. They needed at this moment in time experience, somebody who's done it before, somebody who's not going to come in and, like I said last week, learn to shave on the face of the Mets organization. This is a great hire. This is somebody who, even if he doesn't win ball games by himself, he certainly won't lose them, and he will create an environment where it will be the players that decide wins and losses and not the manager.
Awesome, Johnny. We won't speak to you next week, so have a happy holiday. We'll speak to you on our anniversary.
Same to you guys. Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
That's right. We won't speak to you till after the New Year. John Coppinger heard here each and every week with the Cardboard Memories Major League Baseball report. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, Jim Leyritz joins us, so keep it tuned right here.
Do you own a business? When is the last time you actually had a visit from or even spoke with your insurance representative? Did your current insurance agency sell to another firm or maybe merge, leaving you without the attention you deserve? Prince Associates is a provider of commercial insurance nationwide and represents some of the finest insurance carriers in the industry. Prince Associates has been representing commercial clients since 1965, and we continue to grow and offer our personal services in a competitive and ever-changing market. If you want back the insurance relationship you deserve, reach out to us, 516-822-6550. That's area code 516-822-6550. And ask for Leith or Craig, or find us on the web at www.princeins.com.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening. We're just waiting to get Jimmy on the phone. Hopefully we'll get a hold of him. He's trying to get him on the phone.
So are you going on the DL now from patting yourself on the back? You pulled a muscle?
Listen, you know what? For me, it was a no-brainer. The only other guy I put in that same area was
Bob Guerin, who was out there.
No, I didn't want Guerin. I wanted Bruce Bochy. That was the only other guy. I mean, for me, that's the guy who definitely is the only other equivalent out there. For me, I need a guy that's got a proven track record, a guy that can say, I didn't go with the analytics here because in my past, this and that.
Let me take a look at who in the past few winning managers. Brian Snitker.
Yeah.
He was an analytics guy. He came up through the minor leagues. Never managed before.
Well, because you're going to get a pool of, you can keep trying. Just he said he's got some car issue. But
there was, we didn't want, who was in St. Louis, Mike Schultz.
Yeah, I don't know.
You want Schultz because there's something there there's a problem.
No, but the thing is, everyone's saying like the last 7 managers have but the reason is because everyone's gone to that model. Listen, Tony La Russa's had success. Dusty Baker's had success.
Here's the question. Will the Mets, ask Jim a little bit about this too, will the Mets allow Buck Showalter to be Buck Showalter? That we know what he does and we know what he does not do, and you like what he does not do. Will they, allow him to be the manager? I mean, can you foresee a situation, especially since we had some, back and forth over the few years about the role of the manager now, that they're middle management, they're not in control, that they, that Luis Rojas was taking orders from the front office on who his lineup was based on the analytics guys, and Sandy Alderson, backed that. Will Steve Cohn, will Sandy Alderson, will Billy Epler allow Buck to be Buck?
Well, the thing is, you don't give a guy a 3-year contract, pay him the highest contract the Mets have ever paid for a manager, and then just say, listen, this guy that went to MIT knows better than you.
But can they help themselves? That the question has that. This is a test of the organization. This is a test of whether they understand.
Test for baseball.
Yeah,
this is a test for baseball.
But particularly the Mets, who in the past years, past year at least, got so driven by front office and numbers and analytics and calling shots. They went 180 degrees opposite on this manager, which we both agree is a good thing. We want manager.
Well, I wouldn't say you go opposite because you know what? People have this misconception that every manager.
Well, he's not totally unanalytic, but he's not going to let them dictate his lineup. I'm sure. Buck Showalter is not going to listen to some.
But I don't think Billy
behind the ears MIT grad.
I don't think Billy Epler wants him to.
Okay.
I mean, Billy Epler is a disciple of Stick Michael. Okay,
right,
and Stick Michael,
and there's a feeling that the Yankees' good teams were created by Buck Showalter and Stick Michael.
Right. And so we have Jimmy on the phone. So
okay.
We'll get to that right now. Joining us now is a man who enjoyed an 11-year Major League Baseball career. He played for the New York Yankees, Anaheim Angels, Texas Rangers, Boston Red Sox, San Diego Padres, and Los Angeles Dodgers. His playing days were highlighted by a pair of memorable postseason home runs he hit with the Yankees in 1995 and 1996 in comeback wins. His most iconic of the two occurred in Game 4 of the 1996 World Series against the Atlanta Braves at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. In the series, the Yankees trailed the Braves 2-1, and in Game 4, the Yankees trailed 6-0 after 5 innings. The Yankees rallied for 3 runs in the 6th, setting the stage for his at-bat in the 8th inning. Facing Atlanta closer Mark Wohlers with 1 out, 2 runners on, he hit a 3-run homer to left field to tie the game and cap the improbable Yankees comeback. It is a pleasure to welcome our good friend, the King, Jim Leyritz, back to Sports Talk New York. Welcome, Jimmy.
Hey, what's happening, Mark? How you doing tonight?
We're doing pretty good. Hopefully, you're doing a little better with your car trouble. We appreciate your fitting us in here.
You know what? I went to electric, and I'm trying to figure out outside the mall how to plug it into one of these mall things, and I can't figure it out. So
just let us know if we have to call the tow truck.
Yeah, really. So
when gasoline got up to $5 a gallon, I decided to go to electric.
So we always love having you on our show to talk baseball, but we figured as Buck Showalter gets the Met job, who better to speak to about him? As you played for Buck on the 1986 Oneonta Yankees, the 1987 Fort Lauderdale Yankees, the 1989 Albany Colony Yankees, the 92, 93, 94, 95 Yankees. So take us back to a 22-year-old Jim Leyritz as a member of the Oneonta Yankees when you recall your first interaction with your then manager, Buck Showalter.
Well, it actually happened in spring training of 1986 when I reported to camp. Bill Livesey, who had signed me, put on my card, my draft card or signing card, that guy can hit, you find a position. And I showed up to spring training, and Buck Showalter at the time was running the minor league development. And I showed up, and Buck comes up to me and says, "Hey," he says, "there's not a position on here. What position you want to play?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to go back to catching. I think that's why they signed me, because I was like, yeah, I'm a catcher." And sure enough, he put down catcher, and that was my first meeting with him. And then about 2 weeks later, I was hitting in the batting cage, and Roy White was the minor league hitting instructor. And I was switch hitting, which I'd always done in the cages. I just never did it in the game. And Roy White convinced me after a session with him to try switch hitting, because there was no switch hitting catchers in the Yankee organization at that time. Needless to say, Buck, who was going to be coaching Oneonta, he was the extended spring training coach for all the guys that didn't get put up in the A-ball team to go to this extended spring training in Sarasota. So I spent another 6 weeks with Buck in Sarasota working on my switch hitting. And then I got called up to Fort Lauderdale Yankees for Bucky Dent. And all of a sudden I started seeing pitches that I couldn't recognize because I had never hit in a game left-handed, and I was getting frustrated. And I walked into Bucky Dent's office and I said, "Bucky, I'm not switch hitting anymore. I want to go back to hitting right-handed." And he gave me the ultimatum. He said, "If you don't switch hit, I'm sending you out of here." And I said, "Fine, get rid of me." And the next day I got sent out, and I showed up in Oneonta. And who was my first manager? It was Buck Showalter. So showed up in Oneonta and ended up hitting 360 right-handed for the rest of the season, and pretty much decided that I'm just going to be a right-handed hitter the rest of my career. And then, of course, him and I went together in 1987 to Fort Lauderdale. 1988, he stayed in Lauderdale. I went to Albany. And then 1989, we got rejoined again in Albany. And then, of course, when I got called up in 1990, he was part of the coaching staff of the big league club, and played with him ever since.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned going to Fort Lauderdale. So Buck's your manager there. You look at some of the players on that team. It's you, Kevin Moss, Hensley Mullins, Andy Stankiewicz, and an 18-year-old Bernie Williams. All of you make it to the majors. How important was Buck into setting the foundation for you and all those players for what would be, pretty good major league careers for all of you?
Well, I think the first thing that Buck did so well, which I know 100% the game is missing today, is at those lower levels. He taught us how important and what it was like, how special it was to be a New York Yankee. We had the rules back then where you had to show an inch of your socks, your stirrups. You had to be, you had to be clean cut, clean shaven. All of these things. Buck would always tell us, this is why the New York Yankees are different than any other organization you'll be a part of. They're first class, and they live by the rules. And he really, really emphasized that. So when we got to New York, we really knew that, hey, listen, this is a special place to be, and we need to do whatever we can to stay there. And Buck was a big part of that. And I remember getting caught up in '90. Sitting on the bench my first day in the big leagues in Baltimore, and Buck was one of the coaches, and he came up to me and he goes, "Jimmy, I know that you didn't think you're going to get a chance to play today because you guys got here late, but Stump loves to put guys in on their first day and be ready, to pinch hit." And sure enough, I came up that night, I pinch hit, and I got my first base hit, my first at bat. And like I said, the rest is history. And then, he takes over the team in '92. And, we played together in '92, '93, '94, '95. And, we had our differences. Him and I butted heads a few times about my playing time. And one of the things he always used to tell me that, gosh, I wish I would have had that knowledge. I wish I would have listened to him back then, is about seeing the forest through the trees. And, he always used to tell me, "You're my Mariano Rivera with a bat." He goes, "There's not too many young kids like you that can come in late innings off the bench. And I know 9 times out of 10, you're going to come through for me." And, we had a pretty good relationship. Again, heated at moments, but there was nobody that I respected more knowing the game of baseball. This guy was 2 or 3 steps ahead of every other manager that he ever managed against. And it was fun for me because a lot of times when I got to the big leagues, I'd be sitting next to him because I wouldn't be in the lineup, but I'd be sitting next to him. And he would just be telling me, "Okay, watch, I'm going to do this. And he's going to do this." And sure enough, he'd make the move, and the other manager would make the same move. And he goes, "See, now he's playing in my field because that's what I wanted him to do." He was just amazing at that. And, it was a guy that showed up every day at the ballpark before anybody else was there, and was probably usually the last one to leave every night. And it was just one of the few managers I played for that I can honestly say that nobody was as good as him as being prepared for the other team or the other manager for the moves that he would make.
So, Jim, this is AJ. I'm glad you brought up a little bit of your differences with Buck. I did some reading on things. I found a Joel Sherman writing a couple of years ago in a book. He said that Buck thought you were too brash and too un-Yankee-like when you were a minor leaguer. So how did he make that clear to you other than what you just talked about? Did he pull you aside and say, "Hey, kid, if you want to make the majors, you have to do this"? And how did you react to it then and think about it now?
Yeah, no, he was on my, him and I, the minor leagues actually, we get along, I thought, more better than we did at the big league level, only because I was playing every day in the minor leagues. But for Buck, I just think the biggest thing for him and I was just when I first got called up, you're a young kid, you want to play and you want to earn money, and the only way to earn money is to keep playing. And when I started falling back into this late inning pinch hit guy, position changes and things like that, I wasn't ready to accept that. And I again had not proven myself at the big league level yet, and that's a big part of it. And I think what you see from '93 to '95 was Leyritz is this brass Yankee. He's here's a kid who hasn't proved anything. And my point to them in the early, 91, 92, 93 was, "Hey, you're not giving me a chance. Give me a chance and I'll put up 31 homers and 100 RBIs every season if I get 500, 600 at bats." Well, 93 and 94, I got a total of 500 at bats. And if you added up the numbers, all of a sudden it was Leyritz backs up his bravado. And it was no longer this brass young Yankee, because you know what? I went out and I proved that I could do it. And I think that was it. And I think, unfortunately, Buck and I didn't stay together long enough for me to really to blossom under his tutelage. And I honestly think in 95 going into 96, I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't fired. As far as our relationship goes, I don't know what would have happened, but years later, once he took over Baltimore, and I was doing TV and radio and things like that, him and our relationship got much better. And I always tell everybody always asks me, when you talk about managers, they all want to know who your favorite was, who was the best to play for, who was your smartest manager. And I always say the same thing. Buck was the smartest manager I ever played for. He, again, I go back to the saying, he was 4 or 5 steps ahead of everybody else. He was one of the most prepared. And the things that I learned by sitting on the bench next to him, I still take to this day as things that helped me in my career.
So that begs the question. So you say that Buck knows the game inside and out. He's 2 steps ahead of everybody. He knows what the other manager is going to do. This is an age where, baseball spends a lot of money on analytics department, and they kind of script things out and says that if this pinch hitter comes up, you're going to use this, pitcher to face him. How much do you think Buck will, go with his gut as opposed to going by the script that the analytics department gives him? And do you think, when you say that he was the most prepared manager you ever met, do you think he will embrace all the data that they give him to be even more prepared?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think, like I said, he was already analytical himself before the word analytical was invented. In the game. And that's what I meant. He the things that he studied, the amount of time that he prepared every game and every night, he was kind of already doing that himself. But he also had a pretty good way of being able to know people, to handle people like myself. He had a way to do that. And that's where I think it's going to be even more important that, I think he'll use the analytics. I'm sure he'll eat that up. But at the same time, he also is going to go with some of his gut. I think more than most managers, because you're starting to see the game shift now. You're starting to see teams like, Atlanta, teams like, Dusty Baker, Tony La Russa, these guys going a little bit against the analytical minds and being successful with it, and realizing that I think the analytical side of people of these teams are starting to think, well, you know what? Maybe there is a little bit that we can use the old school with the new school, and it's beneficial for both of us. And I think you're gonna start seeing that shift in the next 5 years in the game.
One of the things you look for in managers, they learn from previous jobs. And you talk about him and mixing analytics with his gut, his baseball knowledge. One of the things you said a couple of years ago is you felt that he had mellowed over the years, that there's a growing period in terms of learning how to deal with 25 different personalities at the big league level. What did you notice? How did he change that, and how he dealt with individual players, as well as we talked statistics?
Yeah. I was interested because I hadn't been around him very much, and then it was when Jim Thome was playing for Baltimore, and I Jimmy and I were pretty close, and I talked to him one day, and he explained to me that just how much Buck had learned, how finally not only to know the baseball side of the game, but now be able to deal with the different personalities, and how he improved that so much from everything that Jim Thome had heard about him when he got to Baltimore. He's like, I don't see any of that, any of the old things that people talked about, because Buck did learn how to be more of a personality. And I think honestly, I think being on TV, I think him doing the broadcasting for a while, I think that actually helped him a lot more. It made him more personable. And like I said, the last 2 or 3 years that I was around him on the field, I brought my kids to games here in Anaheim, and talked to Buck on the field, and being more around him and watching him with his players. The one thing that he always did so great is during batting practice, he would walk around and get the feeling of each kid, each person. He talked to just about everybody that was in the starting lineup. He would talk to the next day and that day's pitcher. He did a really, really good job of trying to get a gauge on how people were feeling that day. Hey, did you get in a fight with your wife before you came here today? Did you get any sleep last night because you got a newborn? Those were all great things that he was beginning to learn. And I think by the time, he got to Baltimore, I think he finally had all that down. And that's why he became such a good manager.
So it's also interesting. You take a look at the teams that you were on that Buck managed. They were a combined 549 wins, 387 losses. And that's pretty impressive over 7 different seasons. I'm just wondering, when you take a look at the body of Buck's career, obviously, every manager wants to have that, World Series championship on his resume. How much do you think the burning desire to win will fuel, what Buck does here in New York?
Well, I kind of compare it a little bit to when Joe Torre took over the Yankees. Buck's taken over a pretty good team. That's, the core of the team's pretty good and a pretty decent, hopefully pitching staff and things like that. But he's coming in at a time, he's familiar with New York. He knows all the BS that goes on outside of the game, and he's coming into a situation with a new owner that is a lot like his owner back with the Yankee days, Mr. Steinbrenner, who's willing to spend the money, who's willing to go out there and get what they need. And I think he's coming into a great situation. And I think that's part of why maybe it was so attractive to him. It's like, hey, I want to win something. I want to prove that I am a World Series champion manager caliber. And this is a great opportunity with these New York Mets to be able to do that. And, we're better. Like Joe Torre coming back to the Yankees, we're better for Buck to come back to New York. And I think for a guy that was so many years under Steinbrenner and then the New York Yankee organization, I think coming back to New York is maybe an opportunity for him, he thinks, to finally get that little ring that he's been waiting to get.
You've had coaching experience in the game, and you have a good relationship with Buck. Any chance that you're going to give him a call and say, listen, I'd like to interview for a coaching position?
That text message has already been sent.
And was there a response?
He said, hey, thank you. What I did, basically, I just called him up and said, hey, I texted him and said, congratulations. Great for you to be back in New York. Good luck with everything. If you need any help, I'm always available. All my kids are growing up now. They're all raised, and I'm ready to maybe get back into it. And he said, I'll keep you in mind. So,
does he have any, do you think, particular requirements for his coaching staff? Does he want people who be yes men or people who argue with him?
Well, like I said, it was just a text. I do not know. I think that's what he's going through right now, is starting to feel it out, going, okay, how much leeway are they going to give me? Are they going to give me an opportunity to get 5 new coaches and a bench coach? Or is it going to be just my bench coach that I'm going to be allowed to get? I think that's what they're going through right now, is the learning process of what the organization is going to give him and the leeway that he has to bring in some people that he may want to bring up that he's had relationships with in the past. And I'm sure that's what him and Sandy and all them are talking about now.
So let's say Buck gets you on a short list and you meet with Billy Epler and Steve Cohen. What would you say your biggest selling point to be a coach on Buck Showalter's staff would be?
I'm sorry, you cut out for 1 second. What was the last?
If you got an interview that Buck got you on a short list, you came in to interview, Buck was there, Billy Epler, the GM, and Sandy was there, and Steve Cohen, the owner, was there. What would be your selling point to the Mets, why you should be on Buck Showalter's staff?
Well, I just think the amount of success that I had, as a catcher, you're used to dealing with personalities. They always say catchers make the best managers because, they're basically the field manager on the field. And, the success that I have had with young players, with, getting the most out of people, I think that, there's so much you can teach. These kids are so talented at the big league level. It's the mental side of things that you really have to get the most out of. And that's what I did my whole career as a catcher. Andy Pettit's personal catcher. I tell people all the time, I caught Andy at least 50 starts or more. I don't know the exact number, but I said, you think all those 50 starts, he was at the top of his game. But guess what? Every time he went out there, I had to make him think he could get through 7 innings every night. And that's your job. And to deal with the personalities, to deal with every reliever that comes in, even though you may have not coached a lot, you pretty much coached your entire career when you were catching. And I think, like I said, that's where I think I would have the ability to talk to guys, to bring out the most and to get them charged up every single day, because it's a grind. And you have to know. Myself, had to know showing up at the ballpark, I may not have been in the lineup, but there was going to be a point at some time that I could get used. And I think that's an important thing to teach some of these young kids that I wasn't taught because I played in the American League. Being in the National League, when I finally got traded to the Padres, Mark, it was the first time that somebody explained to me, hey, Jimmy, you may not be in the starting lineup, but you get a chance to play every single day because of double switches, because you can play 5 different positions. I think that's an important thing that on being on a staff like the Mets, that you need to get to all these players, all 25 of them, that every one of them is going to be relied on at some point. And if you're not in that lineup today, you could be in there at some point tonight. You need to be ready. And I think that's maybe something that has not been taught to a lot of these kids.
Mark wanted to segue now into talking about what's going on with baseball and the lockout thing, and you gave us a good chance to do this. You mentioned one of the things you're talking about is the universal designated hitter. You played in both leagues. How do you feel about the universal designated hitter and getting rid of the pitcher as a hitter?
I think it's got to go one way or the other. I think it's got to be completely taken out in both leagues, or it's got to be taken, or both leagues need to have it. I think that's important. Just for the uniformity, especially nowadays when we have as much interleague play that we have, and when these American League teams go to play National League teams, it really isn't fair. If these guys aren't hitting all year, and all of a sudden they get to the playoffs in the World Series and these guys all got to start hitting again, I just don't think that's fair. And I think it's just got to be uniformed, whatever way they decide to go. It's the amount of money that they're paying pitchers today. It might be a good idea to keep those guys off the base pass and out of the dish, because you're investing a lot of money in these guys.
Another rule change, which I think you are the perfect person to speak on, is AJ and I saw it, all year in the Atlantic League with the robo-umps. So baseball has this new analytic which drives the defensive metrics for catchers, which is a huge thing. How many strikes in their framing, how many strikes they get in a game by their framing. Now, if you take that out, because it's by a automatic umpire, it's where the ball crosses the plate, has nothing to do with the catcher frames it. Because of analytics, the stolen base is now kind of taken out of the game. Will the position of catcher transition now more to an offensive position, and will it cost some of these defensive catchers money in the because of this CBA if they adopt some of these rule changes?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that's that's a part of the game that you cannot lose is catchers, defensive catchers. It's kind of like all of a sudden now second base with nobody being able to take out the runner. I mean the infielder. Now you're talking about guys that are 6'5" that you think could go play second base because they don't have to be as agile and move as much. I think catching is the same type of situation. I don't think you can ever go with a completely offensive catcher. Even though everybody considers Mike Piazza an offensive catcher, Mike Piazza knew how to call a game. He knew the gist of calling a game. The only weakness Mike Piazza ever had in his game was throwing runners out at second base. But he did a great job of blocking the ball. He did a great job of calling a game. Those are the things that you still need from a catcher. And I don't think the catching position is ever going to go strictly all offense like a position player might.
Last one of the night. AJ and I make Jim Leyritz commissioner of baseball. What's the first rule change you're making and why?
No more shifts.
Really? Nice.
Yep, I got to have two guys on one side of second base and two guys on the other side of second base. You can, other than that, you can move your outfielder wherever the heck you want. But as far as the infield goes, I want a first baseman, a second baseman on their side, and I want a shortstop and a first baseman or third baseman on their side. And again, you can move them wherever you want, but I just think that's because of the way they've started teaching hitting. I think that rule change will get these guys back to being good hitters and not just swing for the fences every single time.
Yeah, if they had made that rule change back 4 or 5 years ago, Curtis Granderson's average probably would have been about 50 points higher, because once they shifted on him, it was awful. I mean, he kept on hitting exactly where he was played. It was, and I guess they put 3 guys on that side of the field. But Jimmy, we appreciate it, and hopefully, I get to see you out at Citi Field as part of the Mets coaching staff.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. You're going to see me out at Citi Field pretty much a lot anyhow, just because Steve Napolitano and I are really, really good friends. And, Nap is he's got the suite there that I make a bunch of appearances at. So you'll see me there quite a bit anyhow, between there and Yankee Stadium.
Well, now I don't have to sit in the press box. I can go to Steve's suite.
There you go.
Him and the Mooch. So yeah, I'll bounce around from suite to suite. Jim, thanks so much for your time today. We always love talking baseball with you.
All right, Mark and AJ. I appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
You got it. Jim Leyritz, the king, two-time world champ. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, Russ Cohn joins us, so keep it tuned right here.
The Phoenix Tube Company Incorporated is among the country's leading manufacturers of structural ornamental stainless steel tubing, rectangles, squares, and processed flat bars. The company takes pride in its everyday commitment to quality and customer service. The philosophy of the company has been and continues to be to support the growth of the stainless tube market through distribution and service centers throughout the country. Ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing is used for a wide variety of aesthetic and mechanical products where superior finish and corrosion resistance are required. Some products manufactured include tubing for mirror bracket arms, boat rails and ladders, washroom grab bars, swimming pool rail products, medical equipment, automotive step bars and trimming, as well as structural framing for food processing equipment. For a quote or for more information on how the Phoenix Tube Company can meet your ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing needs, visit them on the web at phoenixtube.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-526-2124.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York on the 365 Sportscast Network. Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening. It's time now for the NHL Report with Russ Cohn, sponsored by our friends over at Soho Table Hockey. What's table hockey, you say?
What's table hockey?
You got to wake up, AJ.
No, I'm doing a little research before we talk to Russ. I want to get the update on canceled games.
So. Some of us might have grown up with rod hockey or bubble hockey or even air hockey tables. Soho Table Hockey is embracing the nostalgia of those old tabletop games and designed a whole new board for the future. Handcrafted with designer wood, state-of-the-art playing surface, unbendable rods, energy-absorbing walls. This is a table hockey game that players age 8 to 80 can enjoy. Even better, the exceptional quality and design allows the game to stand up to the intensity of tournaments. If you've ever seen AJ play this game, it needs to stand up to that intensity, which is why Soho Table Hockey is the #1 choice of championship players throughout North America. Visit SohoTableHockey.com to learn more and start your order on a custom game. You can choose your wood, a centerized logo, and even the team matchups. Go ahead, drop the puck. You'll love Soho Table Hockey so much you won't be able to stop playing. However, right now...
And I want to see if they do a knock hockey version.
Well, right now, if you are ordering it, there's a moratorium. You cannot order a Montreal, a Canadian-based team with a North American-based team because you don't want those table hockey players getting COVID. So, Russ, all of a sudden this was dropped. The Islanders have a game against Montreal Monday. Rangers have a game against Montreal Wednesday. Both of those games have been canceled. There is
it's 12 games to have been postponed now because of cross-border travel.
So, with these 12 games that need to be rescheduled, with the games that were also canceled earlier in the week, I think another 9 games plus the previous games.
It's about 30 before the 12.
Yeah. So is the Olympics severely in jeopardy at this point due to the rescheduling of all these things that need to be made up?
I mean, you really have to ask the players, because if we were going to go with common sense, the players would have called it already. But they're just playing a game with the league because they won this right to decide what's going to happen with the Olympics, because the league said we're not going to get involved, and the league's still not getting involved,
and the players still won't say we're not going. So here's the big argument. The big argument will be, players, do you want to get paid your full salary, or do you want to go to the Olympics? Because now you won't be able to do both.
Well, you think that these games won't be... See, in the agreement that they made with the NHLPA, there is the caveat if, scheduling, has to be changed due to unforeseen circumstances, which obviously this is, the NHL has the right to tell them they can't go. So what you're saying is that from a PR standpoint, the NHL doesn't want to look like the bad guys to players. So instead, they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to have to shorten the season because we can't make up these games.
Here's a counter question.
Shorten the season or lengthen the season, but I think they'll just shorten the season.
Here's a question though. So they assume they allow players to go, and they go to Beijing, and a new strain comes up, and they start to bring back, and they spread it. More games have to be canceled. I mean, is that a factor that's going to, when they come back?
No, if they test positive, they can't come back for 21 days.
Exactly. So what do you do with the league then if they've gone there and come back? So is that something that's going to lead to the decision, leading to it saying, no, you can't go, because the peril is not just, games now, we're canceling games now, but games you might have to cancel in the future if you get sick while you're in Beijing.
No, I think what they're going to do is, if the players go, I think they're still going to play games without those players. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to schedule, as many games as they can through that break, and you will be watching games without Alex Ovechkin and whoever else might be there.
That's sort of like the NBA. They're going to the playgrounds now to get rosters out because so many people are on the COVID list. I mean, would people want to go see clearly non-NHL games?
Well, that's what the Islanders fans are seeing now.
Right,
no,
exactly.
I'm kidding.
No, you're right. We've seen that before that with the COVID list. They're back now a little bit, but
here's the other thing: like when you have to cancel a game, what happened to the taxi squad? Why is that not? Because the numbers
you have to pay for that. It's extra players making NHL money. So if you can't call up from the AHL and they're on call for the NHL, you're getting paid NHL salary.
Yeah, this is just and
it's about money.
It is about money because you know what? We're having all these leagues. We're having putting all these strict mandates in, but yet they're playing to full houses. We're not we're not back in the bubble situation. We're not at like the increased capacity. We're not at social distancing. Granted, everyone. Not everyone, a large majority in all these cities where the game is played, a larger percentage have been vaccinated than not. Because if you've been vaccinated, even if you get the strain, it's not as lethal as when it came out.
This strain, but that's the Omicron. And there's one coming after it, and if you get lax with this, we don't know what's going to happen with that. And another factor is many players are not triple vax. They don't have the booster. You saw that Barry Trotz must have come out the other day and said something about players having the booster, and the Islanders had to tweet and say, listen, Barry was wrong. We've offered the booster to a lot of our players and educated them, and not everybody's taking them. So there's a lot of players.
You know what? In Barry's defense and the Islanders' defense, I think that public relations thing was put out because I believe that's probably a HIPAA violation of him stating that all the players got the third. I don't believe he's allowed to say that.
And what's crazy in all this, though, when you look across a number of sports, are there different regulations in different parts of the country, let alone across countries from Canada to the U.S. That look what's going on in the NBA with Kyrie Irving, who, if he ever gets to play, would only play on road games because in New York City he has to be vaccinated.
This is the world we live in right now, and I think the NHL is finally making a mistake. I think they've handled everything right to now. I really think they should have paused now until the Winter Classic. Let it start back up on the Winter Classic, and if you have to now schedule on days off, you schedule on days off. If you have to schedule a couple of times where a team plays at 10 in the morning and then plays at night, then you do it. I think those are the things you could do, but right now, just saying that they're going to do it team by team, the Red Wings just dropped out. So now, I think we're about 8 teams now that are out of commission. How many more have to fall until you realize you can't have that many games every night now?
So you cancel games, you send players home. How can you control what they do at home? Do they go out to parties?
Well, they have protocols. No, they put protocols
in place. I mean, look, I mean, you saw the charter airlines were complaining that players weren't masking during that. And when they asked them to, they still weren't. So you have to hope that. But again, it's on the players to do that. If not, they're not going to get paid. Like they're just.
And guess what? Guess what? Listen, Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders were as vigilant as any team in the NHL as far as their restrictions, and it went through because listen, they ended up playing. They played Ottawa. They played. You play the Bruins, and a guy on the. You can only be so careful, but you have to play another team that might not be as careful as you and is shedding virus during a game. It's like, it's unbelievable. And it's also, some of the writers around the country have now started making it political. Listen, I like Adam Dater. I think he's a great writer, but I thought he was so off base with saying he's a world-class athlete. Even if they test positive, they're not even sick. They should be able to play, which is just.
He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. I think everybody's acting like this is just the Omicron virus now we're dealing with. Right. And once that's gone, there'll be nothing else. Right. And that's not true.
Right.
Yeah, the next one's coming around the corner.
Yeah, it's just they keep on mutating and there's variations and we don't know what's around the corner and we don't know the long-term effects.
How deadly it might be. And that's the point. Now that there's one that isn't that bad, everybody's sort of like on their rooftop saying, well, just let them play. It's not that bad. But, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that.
All right, Russ, we will speak to you in 2 weeks. Have a great holiday and a happy New Year.
It's going to be hard to have a great holiday with Buck Showalter being chosen, by the way.
Why?
And that's of accepted mediocrity.
Oh.
There's better manager out there. They didn't even talk to Mike Scioscia. They didn't even try. If you have all the money in the world, you go fly out there and you spend a couple of days with Mike Scioscia and you bring him back because he's clearly a better manager.
We're out of time. Mark could go for hours.
You and I will talk.
Yelling at you for
You and I will talk.
Goodbye.
All right, Russ Cohen here each and every week with the NHL and a little Buck Showalter thrown in as well. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, we will have a message from Pims and DCD Law, and then we have the Sunday papers, and then we'll round it out with the NBA and the NFL. So keep it tuned right here, and don't forget, BT Talks Baseball is up right after us as well. If you're a company looking to increase your visibility, to make sure your promotional materials get packaged in the most attractive way and distributed most efficiently, then you need to call in Pims. Whether you're launching a new product and need to assemble customized influencer packages or looking for a more efficient way to manage your inventory and collateral, PIM's involvement helps maximize the impact of your brand's performance. For more than 30 years, PIMS has been helping companies get their message out to the right people, offering personalized distribution services and full-scale inventory management solutions. PIMS works its magic on 3 continents, backed by 350,000 square feet of warehouse space. If you're looking for experience, PIMS is it. They've shipped more than 13 million packages and elevated more than 8,000 brands. Want to know more? Check them out on the web, PIMSinc.com. That's PIMSINC.com, and read testimonials from their satisfied clients. That's PIMS, the first name in marketing support.
Decolator Cohen & DePrisco, LLP, is pleased to introduce their website, policeofficersrighttosue.com, as an educational and informative site designed to instruct members of the law enforcement community of their civil rights in line-of-duty accidents. Many law enforcement members are not aware of their rights to sue and fail to bring lawsuits within a specific time frame, thereby forfeiting their ability to seek rightful compensation against those parties that cause officers to be injured. PoliceofficersRightToSue.com provides successful past results of line-of-duty lawsuits. These examples range from officers being provided with inadequate equipment, RMP accidents, slip and falls, and station house mishaps. If any law enforcement member has a question regarding a potential lawsuit, they can contact DCD at policeofficersrighttosue.com or at 1-800-901-1LAW. That's policeofficersrighttosue.com or 1-800-901-1LAW. You can read it on the Sunday papers.
All right, we're breaking out the Sunday papers, and what do you got in the papers today, AJ?
Not just in the papers. You can read this in a report from the Ohio Department of Education. Back in August, if you watch high school football on ESPN, they do games. They featured a game against a high school powerhouse playing a Columbus, Ohio school called Bishop Sycamore High School. Well, Bishop Sycamore got trounced by IMG Academy. But now it turns out, is Bishop Sycamore Academy really a high school or not? The Ohio Department of Education report saying the school is a scam, that it doesn't have classes. It's got a listed enrollment of only 1. Its building is the residence of, I think, of their former football coach. And it's just, quote, a way for students to play football high school football where they're having to go to class and maybe get college scholarships. We thought you need a high school diploma to even get into college. So it's a whole scam, and they didn't even know what denomination Bishop Sycamore is from, if there is a Bishop Sycamore. Now, the good news is this has resulted in some calls for legislative change in Ohio, at least to regulate these sorts of high schools. But, think about that. This is the John Spano of high school football. They come along, they say, we're a football powerhouse. They got paid for playing on ESPN, and they're not really a school.
I have an addendum, breaking news to that story. It appears that Urban Meyer has just been hired as the head coach of.
Well, I'll tell you what. They were left of the coach. They had two coaches and a parent were coaching the team at the end. The coach was also like their dean of something or other, head of it, financial manager, left a few months ago.
And as gross and disgusting and fraudulent that is, I'd probably still rather have the head coach of that team than Urban Meyer.
Did you see that Urban Meyer actually apologized to Jacksonville? He won't be around. It's got a great thing going to start. Jacksonville's great. They deserve a new stadium, but I'm sorry I won't be around to see all the developments happening.
But if you want, you can catch me at the strip club on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
That's all right. Or hopefully the next major college that really needs a coach and is desperate.
All right, Chaim. So we hate to do this, but every sport is.
This is COVID night on our show. So let's talk about what's going on. What's going on with the Nets? Games canceled. They finally felt they had to put Kyrie Irving on the active roster, at least for away games, because either that or pick three people off the schoolyard. And the Rucker games aren't being held now because it's winter. So what is the NBA going to do? What should they do?
Sycamore, they could have picked up.
Bishop Sycamore, right? But that's a football school, not a basketball school.
Sure
so, Chaim, what should the NBA do now? Should they shut down to New Year's? They're starting to cancel games. Teams are going down even past their G League rosters to fill their Major League rosters. What do you think they should do?
It's a good question, and it's kind of a loaded one. There's a lot that goes into the determination. And I guess the first question that has to be asked is, what is the standard for canceling games? If the standard is, I guess, just, how contagious this illness is, or whether or not there are real ramifications or long-lasting effects. The Omicron variant is not one that's really elicited much of a, it hasn't really done much symptomatically speaking to those who've contracted it. And the NBA has, time and time again, most of these leagues have made it clear that the bottom line is kind of what matters here. I'd be surprised personally to see them shut it down. There have been protocols in place. There will probably switch to more frequent testing. The NFL just recently made the announcement that they're not going to be testing, or they're not going to be testing vaccinated players, or at least far less often. So in order, I guess, to preserve the continuity and to keep, that you don't know doesn't really hurt you. So the NBA might move to something like that. But the NBA's typically been at the helm of the entire COVID thing. They're the ones that everybody else kind of took the lead from.
They had the bubble.
So, yeah. So I can't imagine. I think once that bubble burst, once it became, it was clear from the outset that there was going to need a bubble. It was players they can get players to be all in on that. To switch to one mid-season, I don't think it's something that logistically they could ever pull off. I don't think it's something that players would be willing to do. I don't think it's really an option. I think their choices are cancel, postpone, or just, play around with the testing and the frequency of it. And I think that ultimately the third option is going to be the one they opt for.
Well, how fair is it both to the fans and to the teams? The Nets were down to 8 players. And what type of a product, if you do 8 players, you got a roster, it's the minimum you can have and play. They go 8 players, game in, game out, back-to-back games. By day 3, those players are exhausted. It waters down the product. It's unfair, and it's unfair to the players.
And people are paying top dollar, hoping to see stars, and all of a sudden their stars aren't playing.
Yeah.
Well, so that last point, look, the load management has been the issue with, you want to pay to see the stars and they're not there. So put that one aside for a second. No, it's completely unfair. But I think the NBA stance is going to be, look, listen, as long as people are still paying to show up, and Lord knows that after what the last 18 months have been, people will still show up if they can. As long as they're still on League Pass, as long as, viewership's not hitting a steep decline, as long as they still have a product, they're going to keep pushing that product. I can't imagine they're going to be willing. They see Christmas Day as the Christmas Day games as, something of a Super Bowl for them or a mini one. There's no way they're going to be turning away from that money. unless they have a very good reason. So in terms of the quality on look, we ran a bubble with several players opted out and differences, and people could argue about the quality of basketball in the bubble also, but it was, largely successful. They pulled it off. So I think they would go back to that. Well, fair or not, it is what it is. Hey, listen, pandemics and COVID, Omicron, whatever it is, whatever this stage of it is called, that leads to an unfair playing field. And look, the NFL season, the Super Bowl is probably going to be determined by who's the healthiest come Super Bowl time. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case for the NBA also, but that's how we decided a bubble champion, and it's very possible we go back to that well one more time.
All right, I'm Tauber here each and every week. We'll speak to him after the new year, and we'll switch gears and we'll get Jay Retcher, and we'll talk just a little football to round out the show. And then obviously BT Talks Baseball rounds out the evening here, and buried treasures over the night too. A couple of great vintage baseball games, which is always fun to listen to, especially on the radio. So if you have a smart speaker, you say, Alexa, play 365 Sports, or first you have to enable the app.
So while we're waiting for Jay, let's talk football. How much are you looking forward to Tuesday night football?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Do we have Jay, Mike?
We have Jay, so it's time for the Capco NFL Report with Jay Retcher, sponsored by our good friends at Capco. If you want to get your storm doors in shape, give them a call. Check them out on the web, clearviewlongisland.com. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
So pretty much each one of our beat reports have been about COVID-related, impact on the sport. NFL, all of a sudden we have Tuesday night football. So I can't wait. Does Faith Hill have to record a new song for Tuesday Night Football?
Yeah, I know they got to change the lyrics up a little bit to make sure everything rhymes, right?
So, we just spoke to Chaim, and Chaim said that, basically the NBA championship is going to be determined by what team is the healthiest when it comes time for the playoffs. And you can say the same thing about the NFL. If one of the really good teams gets hit with COVID and doesn't have their star players, playoff time, these games aren't going to get canceled. They're going to go on as is. What are the prospects that, the NFL has this under control and their mandates are such that players aren't going to get, COVID, and they're not going to have to cancel games?
It's kind of crazy, guys, when you think about it. I was just talking to my parents about this, about how it seems like at times sports is the kind of the leader in changing how we look at certain things around the country. Well, whether it goes back, almost 70, 80 years when it comes to civil rights or things like this. I mean, you're hearing some of these NFL players going, man, we're testing so much. And, a lot of these guys that are testing positive, they're asymptomatic. Now, whether, right or wrong, however anybody wants to believe it, now you're starting to hear a little bit of a groundswell of, well, okay, maybe we need to make some adjustments here. Well, even if people, why are we testing these guys, if they're asymptomatic? And I just read some stuff from the NHL. You're hearing some guys like Torrey Krug and other players going, well, if that's what the NFL is going to do, then maybe we should take a look at it. So I think in the next 7 to 10 days, you're going to start seeing, as you guys know, you just saw the Rangers game getting canceled with the Canadians. You're going to start to see some changing in some of the literature now. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some wholesale changes where if guys are vaccinated, they're not going to get tested, and unless you're starting to see some symptoms. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other leagues start to follow suit.
All right, Jay, we appreciate it. We'll speak to you after the new year. Jay Retcher with the Capco NFL Report. That wraps it for us. Next week, we'll probably have a replay of one of our shows. And then the following week, AJ will be on his way down to Florida, but Brett and I will be doing an anniversary special. You're going to get 2 for the price
1 year of the 365 Sportscast Network.
So make sure you download all our apps, whether it be on the iPhone, the Android, or the Alexa, and listen to us many different ways. And make sure you keep it tuned right here for BT Talks Baseball up next. Have a great holiday, everybody.